Welcome friends to another I don't work here lady video. I know you don't work here, but we're accepting applications for the title of most awesome person in the world. To apply, all you gotta do is hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. That said, our first story of the day is by Barefoot Stallion, a Karen and a Loud Comeuppance. So I've always been a very self-confident type of person, but also easygoing and always doing my best to be decent to people. I was just brought up that way. I also expect it from others and have absolutely zero patience for people who think it's okay to act out or be blatantly rude. One afternoon, I was at a Wally World trying to do some shopping. I hadn't thought much about it, but I happened to be wearing the store's colors, a dark blue button-up shirt, neat jeans, and nice work shoes. I'm a trucker and was wearing a shirt for my company. I just like to dress nice and look respectable and dress like this all the time. At any rate, I then hear it, a Karen in the wild. A forceful clearing of the throat. Ahem, excuse me. I turned to look, and I kid you not, I wouldn't have believed anyone could look like the stereotype, but there she stood. Business attire and shoulder-length, straight platinum blonde hair, a huge, the world bows to my whims attitude. She gazed at me sternly, her eyes steely, her demeanor as if she was about to berate a servant who had erred. I stared silent for a moment, gathering back a swell of irritation at just seeing the attitude this lady had, then just simply blurted, "What?" She jerked back incredulous as though I had just slapped her. But she was also quick to recover, her look of steely-eyed and now very justified outrage staring out from me from within her perfectly coiffed straight platinum blonde locks. "Employees should not speak to customers in such a fashion," she informed me. Yes, she used those exact words and did inform me, as though I had done something very wrong by addressing such an important customer in such an impertinent manner. My brows just went up. That was all. But I said in a very level tone, "I don't work here." Then I turned away from her, just intent on going back to my shopping. "You do not turn away from me," she seethed from behind me, then went so far as to grab the back of my suspenders. I very calmly turned back around, looked down at her for a second. I'm 6 foot and she was like 5'1.5" or something. Then I leaned down very close to her face, this was long before COVID, and began in a very low voice, "I said," then raising my voice to its loudest by the word, finished with, "I do not work here." By the time I was out with "here," I was so loud I could have been heard all the way through the superstore. I think I even blew her hair back a little. The look on her face was wonderful. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I thought you were..." I cut her off. Thought I was an employee, yes. I was still dead in her face, my eyes now 10 times harder than hers ever could be, which you thought gave you the right to speak to me and treat me as though I was beneath you. I leaned in even closer. She stood spellbound, a viper and mouse. She the mouse, me the viper. "Well, I've got news for you, lady. Buying stuff from a store and spending a little money does not grant you license to abuse or belittle people." At which point, I straightened and then did a turn on my heel and walked away from her, while she stood there gawping like a fish out of water, absolutely speechless. It was delightfully wonderful. In your opinion, if you were accosted like this by somebody who's clearly smaller than you, do you think you would be an argumentative or confrontational person, or would you just try to get away from that situation? Would you be willing to lean in close to them and say, "I don't work here, stop belittling people," or would you try to just escape however you could? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by HeliT6. Selling cars is a heck of a drug. I worked at the same family of car dealerships for almost 5 years, and still have my vehicles there and hang out with a couple of people that work there. Well, I done goofed. I went to test drive a Tahoe to go get some food when having my car worked on, which seemed like a good idea, until Karen came out of the woodworks and stopped me. Some details: I was giving myself the tour as if I was trying to sell to myself, was wearing a polo and some khaki shorts and had my New Balances on, so I even looked like a salesperson, I guess. Lady walks up and just jumps in the driver's seat. Cool, it's not mine, so I just let her do it. Key fob's in the center console, so she starts it and yells at me. "This thing has way too many miles. How much are y'all asking for this thing anyways?" I say, I don't know what they're asking for it. I was just going to get some lunch since my truck's in the shop." She says, no, you're going to sell me a car, not be a lazy bum and go get food." I say, "Lady, I don't even work here. I can go get Jim Bob or Steely Dan for you though if you'd like, and I'll find something else to drive." She says, "No, we're going to take this one on a test drive. I'm going to offer you money, but you're not going to get any of the commission because you suck at this." I say, I work at the local school district as an IT person. I don't get commission. I don't even think my sales license is still active. Get out and give me the keys, I'm done with you. She says, freak you, I'll never come back to this dealership. I say, good, they wouldn't put up with you either. Still got yelled at by the sales manager for letting an up leave the lot. You really think somebody that's gonna stroll in here and act like that is actually trying to buy something? I think this Karen was just looking for some kind of afternoon to do something and wanted to rag on some employee, give some terrible lowball offer and go back home to whatever grumpy Facebook activities they probably get up to. Our next story is by Geometric. I don't work here anymore. I worked for a coffee and tea franchise for almost 5 years and in 4 different locations. 2 locations only 6 months each. And now that I've been gone for a few months with a new job, I work across the street from one of the locations I previously worked at. This coffee shop had a lot of regulars, some for each store, some that would frequent multiple. There were many regulars that stopped going after I left, and many that I'm friends with on Facebook. So for the most part, I had fun talking to regulars and helping out more than what was asked of me most of the time. A lot of places in my area don't have dress codes for coffee shops, but this was a franchise, so we had a decent uniform for what we could wear. So I come in one day for a drink, I'm wearing my new works uniform, which looks like regular clothes, just specific brands of things we carry, and a regular recognized me and asked for a cup of water. I could see my ex-coworkers are extremely busy, so I explained to them I quit a few months back, but I'd be happy to get it for them if the shop allowed me to. They let me behind the counter to get water for myself daily, sometimes to fix up my drink if it's specific, so I get permission to serve the regular water. But then another table tries to wave me over to get them water too. I tell them that I only used to work there, but they said I looked very familiar, so I had to be working at that time. Guess they couldn't comprehend that they could have seen me getting water daily or as a past worker, but they got pretty mad. But it didn't turn into anything bigger, but I guess that's my story for now. Sorry if it wasn't more exciting. I mean, I think what OP described here is one of the most awkward things that happen when you're trying to be nice. It's like one of those moments where you're on your way out of a building and somebody's walking up to it, so you hold the door open for them. But then all of a sudden 5 extra groups of people appear from out of nowhere behind that person. So you're stuck with, do I stand here and hold the door open for a wave of people? Or do I just kind of dip and awkwardly let the door shut on the next person up? I'm not working here, do I help them out? Is this my life? Am I a doorman now? Is OP the water boy that gets water for every table? Or just the one guy he offered for? This next story is by Samil232. I'm not your drug dealer. In the early 2000s, I had my first apartment above a pizza place and right next to a bar. Because it was downtown, the apartments of the building, was actually a security building where you had to buzz to get up if you didn't live there. This was great. At first, because we didn't have random drunk people wandering the halls, etc. But after about a year, some new people moved in across the hall. They started getting guests at all hours of the day and night, and these guests would press whatever button they felt like, or possibly all of them, to get let up instead of buzzing the apartment they actually wanted. We knew it was the apartment across the hall because when we'd tell them they had the wrong apartment and not buzz them in, we'd hear footsteps tromping past our door a few minutes later. So they either picked the right button the second time or one of the other neighbors would blindly let them in. One night, about 3 a.m., we get a buzz. At least the second one that night, and I was fed up. I picked up the receiver and screamed into it, "Do you know what the freak time it is?" There was a very sheepish, "Sorry," and a guy explaining that he's looking for name of neighbor. I calmed down a little and told him he had the wrong apartment and hung up. There were fewer buzzes after that and things were okay for a while, until one day we hear big boots storming up the stairs, a bang and a big booming voice, probably with a loudspeaker saying, "Everyone on the ground." We stayed super quiet in our apartment until everything was over. It turns out that apartment was a meth lab, and we overheard the police raid. A few days later, we saw the eviction notice for that apartment for the health and safety of the other tenants. Considering how often in the news you hear stories about meth labs exploding, I kind of wonder how OP was feeling after the fact, realizing they were living next to something that could literally blow up. And I don't know if there's other health concerns from living near such a thing like that. I guess OP clarified that it wasn't like a crazy setup apparently, but I'd have been pretty concerned learning that I was living next to such a thing. Our next story is by Author Output, Nice Lady at the Bookstore. Recently, I was at a hiring event for a local bookstore, and I was perusing the shelves with my earbuds around my neck as I use music to stifle anxiety in large crowds, though they weren't hooked up to my phone. A lady comes around the corner and comes up to me, asking if I work there, and I blink at her for a moment before telling her, "No, I don't, but I'm hoping to." She laughed and informed me that she thought my earbuds were a black lanyard, which the store staff wear, and we both laughed before she went to find someone that did currently work there. Isn't it at least a little cruel that the one thing OP was using to help with their anxiety actually caused a potentially anxiety-inducing event? I feel like the last thing OP needs is to overthink about their earbud position. This next story is by Dr. Bad Pun, Hot Office Stiff. I work for a backup power company that services generators and received a call for a low coolant temp on a unit. I arrived on site and opened up the engine to see it was just a bad heater. Luckily, I had a spare because this is common. I've been here for maybe 30 minutes working when this stiff in a nice suit and a black Jaguar is leaving. Mind you, the unit I'm working on is in the sub-level of a parking garage. I'm shoulders deep in this engine reconnecting lines when I hear this guy blaring his horn, which caused me to jump a little and bump my head. I peer over my shoulder to see this guy behind me with his window down as he says, "Why the freak is my office still hot? I've been at my desk working for hours and you haven't done a thing about it." I grab a towel and wiped off my hands while I was standing up and tried to inform him that I didn't work on HVAC, nor did I work for the building. Sadly, I didn't get to say any of that because he'd rather curse me out more, saying, "There's no excuse for how bad you are and you should get it freaking fixed or I'll tear your butt a new one." The realization that he wasn't going to listen to me hit and knocked something loose. Where normally I'd get pissed, I was so dumbfounded by this rando that I just started chuckling and flipped him off to go back to work. This guy screamed at the top of his lungs before honking his horn more and tearing off up the garage. I later told my manager what happened, and he laughed, saying he would have had a screaming match with him about stuff in his house just to irritate him more. I don't know if it ever got fixed because I haven't got sent back to that site yet. With an attitude like that, you kind of hope their HVAC unit didn't get fixed for a while. By the way, I just looked it up. One of the people I look up to the most is Willis Carrier, because I would not survive without the modern air conditioning system, and he was the dude that invented the first one. Thank you, Willis Haviland Carrier. Our next story is by a watcher only. I have no clue how this happened. So I was at a grocery store after work, and I'm in the healthcare world. I was dressed in all black scrubs and about to get in line. A gentleman was standing in no man's land, and I couldn't decide if he was in line. I politely asked. He said no, he wasn't in line and was waiting for his wife. As I go to take the 3 steps to be in line, right at the end of the conveyor belt, a lady cuts me off and says, "Excuse me," and proceeds to get in line in front of me with an overflowing cart. Now, this grocery chain has a common practice of using empty boxes to carry your goods, and I was holding a box with a few things, maybe 7 max. The lady then proceeds to keep asking if I needed to get through to set my stuff down. I told her, "No, I'm okay standing here." As the line progresses and I make it to the conveyor, I sit my box down and she goes, "Oh, you were checking out. I thought you were stocking shelves." No idea how she concluded I worked for the store. General attire seems to be khakis or black pants with dark blue store logo on polo. She wasn't overly rude, but mind-blowing she thought I worked there. This is one of those situations where if you're carrying a ladder or you have a hard hat and a high-vis vest, you can probably get just about anywhere you want to go. If you carry a box and you walk with some purpose, you might be able to convince some people that maybe you're doing something else. It's a bit more of a stretch than a ladder and a high-vis vest and a hard hat, but you can kind of see the logic. She should have definitely have realized though. And our final story of the day is by Who Wireds. I live here. You're at the wrong floor. I live in an apartment complex on the 2nd floor. There's only flats on this floor. On the 1st floor, there's doctors and therapists. So this morning, I was playing with my son when suddenly the doorbell rang. We hadn't ordered anything and don't get visitors very often, especially at this time, so I was confused. I opened the door and an old woman stood in front of me breathing heavily. When I greeted her, she wanted to enter, but I stood in the door because I knew there must be a misunderstanding. I asked if she wanted the doctor as she looked a little bit sick because of the heavy breathing. She told me no and then some name I didn't recognize. But in my country, it isn't that uncommon to not know your neighbors very well. But after I asked further, we discovered that she wanted to go to the therapist, who is located directly under my flat on the 1st floor. I asked her if I should bring her there, but she refused and said now she knows the way. No shouting, no, but I must be right. Just an old lady who was at the wrong floor. Not as dramatic as other stories here, but it is my first I don't work here lady experience, and I wanted to share it with someone. I just kind of feel bad for the old lady that walked up a flight of stairs just to be told, yeah, no, actually, you just need to go right back down the first flight of stairs, it's downstairs. Considering she wasn't rude, completely understandable, I have well wishes for the lady. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.